Hello, Tim here, and welcome to another painting demo. And this time I paint this iconic hilltop village of Gassano in Tuscany. This Tuscan hillside village presents a few interesting challenges. Trying to capture the journey from this foreground vegetation. I think there are allotments, and then there's a railway line, fairly level ground, and then we've got the incline up to the village and all of those different buildings there. Trying to get the feeling of perspective and the height and the journey up to that bell tower, the Campanile up there, as a sort of on the peak of that hill. But we have to try and simplify. I'm just thinking whether I'm going to be drawing every individual building or just get the impression of a few buildings, like that yellow one there, the red one here, this one here. Washing, not sure I'm going to include that, but a cooler blue one there. Just trying to get in a few buildings and then just work in lines around them just to suggest the grouping of all of those buildings. On the whole, we've got a sort of curved shape of that hill, roughly, with that bell tower there at the peak. And then we've got all of these layers of the angles of the rooftops that are generally horizontal lines. There. Unless they're facing, I think we've got that kind of pitched design. Bit of a funny one there, but quite shallow. But essentially, they're all horizontals, there, down this side. And of course they tilt a bit more. The more we go down that way, the more they're going to tilt that way with the sort of curved nature of the peak. We've got some warm earthy tones of some of the buildings, some cool blues, some yellows as well. We've got various greens. About half of this composition is green. So I'm going to have to introduce different brush marks and different shades of green in there to suggest the form of the different types of foliage and vegetation. We've got mature trees, small trees, and then in the foreground, looks like some sort of mini orchard or maybe some grapevines, a little bit of grass as well. There's the railway line kind of punctuating the near side here to then we get over the railway line, and we're gradually going up the hill. There's going to be a fair bit of value control as well, managing the contrast between the bright sunlit buildings and the darker vegetation in the foreground. It's going to require a little bit of careful planning beforehand to think about where the lights are and where the darks are going to be, and there's some subtle shadows within the buildings as well. For example, there's a little bit of darkness there. I'm just thinking about the shapes of some of these shadow shapes, like that one there. Nice angle like that. Bit of a shadow in there. Shadows here. Shadow there. I guess that's indicating the height of the sun, isn't it, as well? So we've got the rough stone walls as well, but that might be just too much detail. There's some lovely colours on that one there. But yeah, lovely stone walls to deal with. Bit of texture variation of that, and the vegetation as well. Next challenge is the composition and the balance of the scene between the hilltop village and the vegetation. Try and get that right, and the angle of that railway line there as well. It's coming down a little bit top left to bottom right, so not horizontal. I think it looks quite nice, that sort of diagonal there. Trying to position the bell tower right in the composition as well. So it's all about careful planning and trying to get the initial outline drawing right. So let's get into the materials then and the drawing, the outline drawing stage. Materials I'm using for this painting: Saunders Waterford cold pressed 300 grams paper as per normal, 15 inches by 11 inches. Paints from Jackman Art Materials, neutral tint, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, spring green, freezing green, cobalt green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, English oxide, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, lavender, quinacridone gold, lemon yellow gouache, and a white gouache. So, outline drawing, first of all, trying to get in all of those complex shapes of buildings, the position of that tower as well, and then in the foreground, the feeling of all that foliage and trees, and these allotments that are sort of their lines are leading us into the scene. So I'm going to start drawing on the left-hand side here and just get in a rough outline of the top of the village with the bell tower around about there. And then the bottom of the village is something like that. And there's I think it's actually a railway line just here. Not sure if I need it in the composition. And then there are these lines of the vegetation, the plants in those allotments sort of going into the scene. I think that's pretty much it with the composition. Let's get the rest of the buildings in correctly. So there's the rest of the church there. There's a yellowish building here. Then I'll continue over to the left. Now I'm back into the middle again, and then just below the yellow building is a whitish building, something like that. And then almost coming down to the start of the vegetation, there's a little sort of tree line at the base of the village. So I'm down to there now. To the bottom right of the yellow building, there's more of a pinkish building. And then large brown building there. To the front of that, there's a cooler bluish building, maybe it's white. And then a red building. Let's go back up to the top. there's another building that's quite prominent. There. Now, below the buildings, we've got these small trees. Oh, there's a sort of step pattern of buildings coming down there. So here, there's a large group of trees. There, large group of trees. Here there's some sort of, is it the building for a railway station or something? Now, coming down to our level is that sort of line there. There's a brighter tree there. A roundish tree there. Very left-hand side of the village, there's another building that's on the skyline, silhouetted against the sky. A few cypress trees here, but they're sort of hidden by the trees behind them. Now coming out into the foreground, some could be large vines or small trees, and a shrub in the bottom left corner. There's some sort of vegetation coming up from the foreground. Just here, there's like a row of, could be vines, not sure, could be fruit trees, raspberries, blackcurrants, something like that. Right, I'm not going to put the windows in, just make sure I get in the main shape of the village, and then all of those rooftops, the angles of those rooftops, trying to place them natural looking. Trying to get right the demarcation of buildings to vegetation, building, vegetation. There, I think the drawing's done. Right, let's lay down some paint. Brushes I'm using for this one, Tintoretto synthetic mop brush, series 1407, size 6, and a small round synthetic brush and a small flat brush. First of all then, getting in that sky and quite an intense blue. the light's coming from the left, so we're lighter on the left, darker on the right, and then come down, paint coming down to the tops of the rooftops. Okay. A blue for this one. Well, a cobalt blue and cerulean. And a test. So it's pretty much a 50-50 mix of cerulean cobalt going over my masking tape and then down to the buildings. Around the dome of the church tower. And then lighter. As we go over. Coming down to those rooftops. There. Right. Now, next, the buildings, and a mixture of earthy colours, browns, yellows, ochres, some reds. So a good kind of, well, some blues, some cool blues as well. And let's start with a light red. Value-wise, it's similar to the sky. Get in this red one here. Now there's some greyer ones. So mixing with that sky colour I had earlier. bit of burnt sienna, cobalt blue, getting a sort of mid-grey colour. And then some of these buildings are white, but the shady side of them is a cooler blue. I'm using a bit of lavender here. Grey building on that left-hand side. And the yellowish, yellow-orange building around about there. The tower is lit up on the left-hand side. Is that dry now? Tower's lit up on the left-hand side. Just be very careful. With my paint, because that sky is still damp. This is a weaker solution than that sky. So if I accidentally go into it, a nasty bloom will appear. Now, next, let's get in some base colour for these greens. And there's all sorts of greens, cool greens, warm greens, a little bit more intense down in the foreground with some of those warmer greens, yet more yellowy greens. To some extent in that, just at the base of the village as well. And then going up into the village, probably cooler greens, I reckon. So cooler green, let's first of all start off with mainly Virgin green, a little bit of burnt umber. And that sky's still damp, so I'm getting a soft edge, which might be all right. That tree there, just down to a rooftop. As I say, I'm not sure if it's the top of a platform building. Now a bit of a lighter olive green. So I've mixed a bit of white gouache with that viridian. And then some more yellowy greens. Over this side, down to the top of this white building on the extreme right hand side. Need to get in these buildings here and here. Right, continue on down to the bottom of the hill. Now, coming across from the bottom of the hill, coming across to the allotments is a warmer green, and it's where I'm sure it's a railway line or something. Get in. Get in that warmer green. Then a different green over here. We're going warm and cool. Bit of cobalt green. Bit cooler on this right hand side. There we go. Brighter. This photo of mine was taken in early October, so we've got some sort of autumnal colours creeping in. Some of the leaves are turning yellow. Some of the leaves are turning yellow. Some are still green, some are brown. So I'm just really trying to cover the paper. I'm going to sort out the values later on, but just cover the paper. My masking tape is doing something weird to the washes. Just over here, there's I think some of the glue of the masking tape is coming in. It's got to make sure with this, it's happening here as well. Got to make sure I go over the masking tape. It's weird how different brands of masking tape, they do different things. Right, next we've got the detail of some of the, detail of the houses, rooftops. Start off the rooftops first, then creating some more form to the trees and shrubs and vegetation, trying to create their form a bit more and their volume. And then we're almost then into the detail stage. Right, so is this dry up here? Yes, it is. So smaller brush now. Synthetic brush 4, and this is when all of this hopefully will start to look like buildings a little bit more with these rooftops, cadmium red, ultramarine blue. Now, not too watery. And let's start up here, left of center. And then my paper's still a little bit damp, so I've got to be careful. And the church tower. Just continuing on these lines, just defining all of those rooftops. It's quite complicated on the right hand side here. Now, in between some of the houses, there's some darker shadows. So I'll just get in some of those as well. So no windows yet, we'll wait until a later stage to do those. Okay, that's the rooftops done up in the village, higher part of the village. Let's get in some of the rooftops for lower down. Too watery. Okay, now to create some of the form of the foliage, I'm going to use I'm going to try my little flat brush. It's a 1/2 inch width synthetic flat brush, and it's normally for me quite a good way of creating shadow within trees, just to create their form. So something darker here, and then where I see a tree appearing, for example, that could be a tree there. So go in just, it's a bit too dark, go in just around it. And you create that hard and soft edge. So there's a hard edge there. Remembering light coming from the left, so we've got the light on the left-hand side of the trees. Now, between that white building and this red building, there's a little bit of shade. And now just coming down to that band by the railway line, there's a darker edge to it. darker edge, but soft edges, so that darker band just below the bottom trees there. And then I guess this side of that railway line, there's a little bit of darker shadow. And then coming across the field are some, to me it looks like cooler shadows. Yeah, cooler shadows. And then just in this bottom left-hand corner, we've got a bit of dark foliage behind some lighter foliage. And then continuing down into the foreground, the bottom of my page, again darker. And really, I'm always getting quite abstract here with my brush marks. Not too detailed because it's the foreground. The main focal point, the focus of attention, is the village. Okay, some of these marks, I don't want them to look like it's been made with this brush, so I've got to try and disguise those, some of those marks a little bit. Use my fingertips just to help things along. Okay, so while this is drying, let me get in some of the windows now. Up in the village, make them look even more building-like. Back to my small round synthetic, and something dark, not too dark though. So neutral tint with a little bit of ultramarine blue. And there's all of these windows staring at us. And with this small synthetic brush, you can just squeeze out the paint, turn the brush 180 degrees, and then you get hopefully a flat edge. And then that will give us a good brush head for creating these windows. I'm not actually looking too much at the photo now, just really putting in these windows where I see fit. Some of these buildings have got regular spacing of windows. Obviously, some of these windows will be wider. Something more substantial for the bell tower. Nearly there. Actually, some of the rooftops, they've got a very dark edge to them. So particularly noticeable with some of the rooftops that are closer to us. So some of these, for example. Yeah, I think that looks all right for the buildings. Right, back to the foreground. Let's get in a darker edge. think some of these foreground elements, they're quite important to connect them with the middle ground, just to get that cohesion with the scene. I think I'm going to get in that railway line. It's quite a nice line going across, and it's a lost and found line. It appears, then it disappears, then it reappears. Now, a straight edge to this, and so appears, then disappears. Could use a ruler for this if you want to. Actually, there's a couple of lines. And then there's some stakes for the plants. Over on the left-hand side, we've got some of these old gnarly trunks. And this tree on the left-hand side, that's quite a nice framing of that left-hand side. So there's the twigs. Put in just a few leaves in a minute. I think I need to go darker down here. And go over my really cheap rubbish masking tape. There's my tall pencil cypress trees. Yeah, enough said. quite a strong line on top of that roof. And shadow coming down. Let's do another shadow there. And another shadow there. Shadow there. Don't overdo it. Must make sure I go over my masking tape. Although when I peel it off, I don't think it looks nice having a sort of bit of a white gap around it. I need to go darker just in a few places here. Here we are. Right, so I'm nearly there. I think a little bit of white gouache in a few places wouldn't be amiss. See, these rooftops, you can pretty much make them up. Just do your own design. As long as you get the feeling of the village here. That's the main thing. Right. There are a few little verticals. Just a few. There. White gouache. I think I will reach for my normal rigger brush, Lebanson rigger brush. Get a very, very fine point with this. And white gouache out of the tube. Actually, no, I've got a bit of rosy stuff going on down here. Let's use some of this. Got to work it a bit because the gouache dries quite hard. Don't want it too thick, don't want it too thin. So mix to a good paste, and then just a few lines here and there, those posts in the allotments, and then maybe just a little bit of light on the railway line. Up in the village, there's a few little posts and things. A little bit of foliage catching the light. In that foreground. Oh, tree. Nearly forgot the tree. Stick with this brush. And then just, oops, too light. They're quite rhythmic, these leaves. Looks like some sort of birch tree or similar. Some denser groupings of leaves, and white gouache, spring green, just a few little lighter leaves against the darker background. There we go. A little bit of a critique then of my painting, Gassano in Tuscany, hilltop village, and a fairly complex village with all of those different buildings up there. The focal point of the company, the bell tower, trying to get the shape of the village and the feeling of perspective with the distance between the rooftops getting a little bit narrower as we go towards the peak. So they're fairly sort of wide apart there, and then they get a little bit closer together towards the top there. The geometric pattern of the lines of the rooftops, generally horizontal, and then all of those windows staring at us, just little black, almost, well, quite dark rectangles. And then as we come down, trying to capture the different foliage that's beginning to appear with the lower trees at the bottom of the village, interspersed with a few buildings, 3 buildings there in the foreground, some nice diagonal shadows across those. Then the ground levels out to the railway line. Either side of the railway line, it's sort of straddled with grassy type foliage, soft grassy type foliage. And then we come into the foreground with the allotments and different fruit trees and olive trees and grapevines growing in there. So just trying to create the impression of all of that foliage without taking anything away from the focal point being the village up there. And then finally, just a few little touches with some opaque paint, trying to create just a little bit of movement with some of the lighter foliage against a darker background. So I hope you like that. I think the painting turned out all right in the end. Hope you have a go yourself. Certainly if you're on Patreon, have a go. I share the high-res source photo with you. And we get to all share, anyone that has a go, we get to share our efforts in the community gallery, and we can all have a little butchers of that and put in our comments. So thanks anyway for watching, and I'll catch up with you on the next video. Bye-bye.